Hello and welcome everyone to the Sport for Change dialogues. As a quick background, this platform has been designed to curate and showcase exemplary stories, interventions and campaigns through sport and beyond, narrated by change makers themselves, helping to improve societal outcomes. For some of you missed last couple of episodes, we focused on business sustainability and sports excellence or grassroots sports. And there's a link on our website if you want to see that. And today our focus is on education, which means how can we use sport as a tool to drive educational outcomes, how and if we can use sport as a way to drive educational outcomes. And to have inputs on this very, very topical and sensitive topic, we have a special guest, Dr. Suman Sachdeva. Dr. Suman leads the Global Partnership for Education and Quality Education at UNICEF. She's an education development expert with over 25 years in strategic planning and programming experience with UNICEF and international and national nonprofits, as well as government, specifically in the area of elementary and secondary education, gender and life skills. So welcome to Sport for Change dialogue, Suman.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak with you and on this very, very important topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Suman. And so, just a cue to folks who may have some questions is a chat box. Please drop in case there are any questions. We will not do Q&A in the end, but if we have time, we can pick few, but we will certainly respond back to you later on if we can't use the time in the session to do that. But feel free to just drop in as we talk through. Let me just start, just warm up the context a bit for everyone, start a bit about your personal journey. I know that you're currently working from a very beautiful place by Atlantic in West Africa and as part of UNICEF team. So I just wanted to check, get a sense of your journey in the education development space, some snippets and leading up to the current role. Any certain elements, anything you can drop in for the audience would be helpful.
Thank you, Parminder. So I don't know where to begin because everybody has a story and I have mine. My takeaway from my story is that education is the tool. Actually, it's really a tool for empowerment. And I'm coming from a very modest background where my parents were refugees, or you can say running from Pakistan during partition to India, and saw lots of hardship. And my mother, mother of 4 children, lost her husband very early in life and wanted her last one, which was me, to be educated in a good school because she thought she did not have education enough to take care of all of us. So she went and pleaded with the principal in the school, not only for getting me admitted, but also giving concession in the fees. So it was a missionary school. And thankfully, the father agreed and I went on to this course of education. And I realized nothing is impossible if you really want to work on it. I was inspired by my teachers and I thought I should also get into this profession. But somehow I landed up during my whole course of college and everything into education and into development sector, which I continued to work in. And my journey has been with programs at the national level. We had a district primary education program. Many of us are like a mafia. We call ourselves EdSil Mafia, been part of that program. Moved on and worked with lots of international and NGOs spaces. Interesting thing is that this gives you an exposure in the lives of people you're working with and gives you exposure to the ground realities, which are very harsh, very hard. So all your theories and your propositions are totally broken when you go onto the field and try and understand what's happening. And that's what helped me. I looked into the South Asia, worked on life skills program with children in strife, children in conflict, children of sex workers, and then, of course, in the school. So that's been a journey. I was in India country office, UNICEF, for long time, for about 4 or 5 years. It was my second stint with UNICEF India. Another was a decade ago when I decided I'll go down, I'll leave UN and just go and get myself more grassroots experience. And I came back, served that country, and then I decided, let me try and put my experiences to test in another context. So I'm here in Sierra Leone, is a country, I don't know if many of you have heard it or not. It's a very poor, very beautiful, but very, very poor, raw country. And here I am looking at the Global Partnership of Education Quality Program.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Suman. That's been helpful. Just before I start off, UNICEF, let me just dive directly into the topic at hand, which is sport and how can we use that. So just wanted to get a sense of UNICEF's vision of using sport. I know, I've been reading about studies that have happened as part of UNICEF's work. But before I do that, let me just maybe for the sake of audience, run a small video, small clipping, which we picked up from, I think, a study called Getting Into the Game, which UNICEF did in 2019. So let's see if video can run. Can we have the video, please?
Everyone loves a good match. Ali versus Foreman. Venus versus Serena. Messi versus Ronaldo. But around the world, children are fighting some fights that are not fair. Over the last 20 years, sport has become a powerful way to promote children's development. Some people might say, it's just a game. Boys being boys, or girls being girls. So the Basa Foundation and UNICEF looked at more than 300 projects in over 100 countries and proved that sport is much more than that. Sport can teach you skills for the game and for life. It teaches you that fair play is a better tactic than violence. Your coach will believe in you, even when no one else does. And the ring might be the safest place for you to be. Sport shows you that your disability is not inability. And that you deserve to be on the team. Sport can change children's lives. It's time to get into the game.
Thanks. So, this, we just picked it up and talks a bit. So maybe you can just throw some light, Suman, on UNICEF's vision, or at least the experiment you've done of trying to use sport in education, specifically to improve educational outcomes. Of course, we'll go deeper into what worked, what didn't work, specific project, but a broad sense of when did it start and what all did you see based on your work and experience on this.
Thank you for the question, Parminder. The thing is, sports is an integrated part of education, but ironically, when we talk about education, we only think about learning and we think about the classroom situation in which learning is provided. I think UNICEF and many other organizations such as yours and others have gone steps ahead to see that this can be really a powerful tool for many things, for creating a safe learning environment in school, for inclusion, to break gender norms, to empower children, provide them life skills, to support retention of students, make it more enjoyable. So there were lots of things that can work with respect to sports in education. And I think it was recognized very early in time that this should be one part of education and as much as integrated. But I think we have graduated from that thinking, and now we are thinking more meaningfully into looking at integration as part of policy. And we have a good policy which is talking about things, how you can integrate. But we did start some experiments in some of the states, and I must share with you some 2 or 3 interesting experiments in the states, which started way before in 2008 or maybe before that, and continued small sporadic ways, but never really saw the full life cycle, because again, you need a lot of resources and donors buying into how sports is looked at as a separate item. So one was this whole piece in Chhattisgarh, which is a civil rights state, and we used sports as a tool for providing psychosocial support to children who were impacted by violence. And that really worked. It became a very, very essential and integrated part of that system. So we experimented that in several districts, got the leadership to buy in that. And that was a tool which people just did not want to give in. If you were talking about education, you talk about sports. The second was in West Bengal, where we worked with Kanyashri girls. So these Kanyashri clubs are girls empowerment clubs, which are school-based platforms, necessarily has children, girls going to school and even out of schools coming as part of a safe space for them there. So we started looking at competitions, sports competitions, gave them a self-defense as an skill, and then held competitions against that, and it became really interesting and sought after skill by the girls. So this helped us to understand that, well, yes, we were breaking gender norms here. Yes, we were giving inclusive spaces to girls, and they were coming from communities which were excluded. So this became very, very meaningful exercise in this West Bengal. And the third experiment was again in, I wouldn't call it experiment, a strategy, was in Assam Tea Gardens, where there was more focus on how you can enhance learning. Sports can help to teach, sports can help to expedite learning, and sports can definitely help in inclusion. So all these 3 strategies were experimented in Assam. So interesting way, small experiments, but it's been an ingrained culture as part of the education of our programs.
Sure. No, very interesting. In fact, the study which I'm referring to, just quoting from there, which is UNICEF study, which says that the top couple of reasons why sport for development has been tried out as a program across the globe. One is, of course, that children love it. It's very appealing to children, and the second, interestingly, is that it finds community support very easily for some reason. And the other thing which was noteworthy was that, in terms of the causes for which sport was used in these programs, number 1 came up still as education, and number 2 was social inclusion, which you also mentioned. Third was health. I would have thought health would come as number 1, but it is the other way around in some form. So I think the idea that even some of the studies and surveys on why these 300 programs that were surveyed, education came up right on top. And I think from your work that you just referred to in these 2 or 3 states, let me just dig a little deeper and ask, did you find any enabling factors or constraining factors around these programs? I mean, why did they launch only in certain states versus others? And was it the donors, the policy, the leadership, or whatever else, just to get a better sense of why certain programs or states tried it and others didn't in some form?
So thank you. I'm not saying that these programs are only in some states. Many states were experimenting, have integrated. I particularly thought of bringing them to table, sure, because these are interesting way of looking at things. And they are being tested out in many states, not only these 3 states. But I personally feel it's the leadership intent and commitment to a strategy that is put in place. Our job is to make sure that whether you do a pilot or you do a strategy, you make it work on the field and use it as an evidence base to say there is merit in scaling it up. And then the leadership, which is primarily in India, we have our public system of education, which is the largest in the country, maybe even largest in the globe, which sees that, government can really scale up initiatives if they want to. We have so many schools, and these schools have most vulnerable children going as well to them. So most of the government schools are the ones where you have children, poorest of the poor as well, getting access. So that's where the sustainability component comes and the intent of leadership. So it works when there is a buying in here. And of course, donors also try and look at what will be more impactful. So perhaps sports has not been able to show that impact we win. So here, research and evidence in terms of how sports has been a tool which has made a difference is important. So that's my take on how this can really get into this under the skin of it.
No, great. I think and I have a question on that a little later in terms of the whole idea of impact and evidence and how important it is for any program, specifically sports, which has been very feel good as an intervention, but the quantitative measures around it, I think there is room for improvement there. Just getting into, I think, the whole idea of, I think, the current situation where we're just coming out of a pandemic-related, shutdown or break, and we have enough research data, on the learning poverty or the unfinished learning or whatever else is being touted about in terms of children falling way behind their grade level learning context. And I think government and administrators across are looking at how do we create enrichment programs that can help children transition back into schools in some form. So I think what I wanted to check with you, and maybe based on your recent context, can sport or play help in this transition, especially at a time like this now? I mean, it'll be good for educators and administrators to kind of debate and see if it can be used as a tool to, ease the transition that we are so wanting to have at this time.
Sure, Parminder, I think it's a very, very valid question, and audience should also reflect on it a little. I'm just going to take 10 seconds coming back to see my internet connection is showing a bit of instability. Just give me 10 seconds moment.
Sure. I think.
Yes,
right.
I'm back. Sorry. Yes, I thought because we are in that part of the globe, and I really appreciate what we have, how we have charged ahead in India. So this place still seems as if it's India 30 years ago in terms of technology, in terms of progress. So it's ironical. We have lots of aid coming in here, but there's way to go ahead. Okay, so bringing back the focus on the pandemic, definitely, because you have seen that the children have been out of the system for so long. Schools have been closed. Girls have been experiencing lots of issues back home, and there are research and there's evidence and data which has been generated to show that there's a real important value in providing psychosocial support. And as I was saying, sports is the first thing. The first thing is to create those safe spaces in school, and then to provide the psychosocial support in a much more joyful, meaningful, productive manner. And what best can be other than the sports to charge this forward? So I think schools and education programs must focus this more than ever before. I would say that, well, yes, learning has been lost. We're all looking at learning recovery, coming up with strategies how you can recover learning in schools. But the easiest way also is to create that enabling environment and prepare children and schools to provide that learning. And that's where sports can really play a good role.
Right. Yeah, no, I think, because some of our recent discussions and more tongue-in-cheek really where, our discussions with some of the donors also was around, look, we are prioritizing foundational learning at this time, and sport can perhaps come in later because that's the need of the hour. So I'm not sure if they can be viewed as a mutually exclusive context because so maybe, because and I think what I hear you saying is sport is an intrinsic part of the foundational learning and not as a separate context. So that, I mean, so is there a way for us to, you think even if we were to look at foundational learning or fundamental language and numeracy skills, which is, I think, fairly hot, interesting topic in India at this time in terms of government's push is also around that. can sport really help add value there specifically at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'm looking at this program, which is Global Partnership of Education in many countries, almost 70 odd countries or so, where the focus is largely on foundational learning. And we are talking about early moments matter, where play-based learning is something that everybody is propagating on, building on that and moving towards sports, because I look at play and sports as intertwined. When you're talking about a more unstructured way, and that's it. When you bring in some elements which are more structured, you can call it sports. But either way, both of these have to be nurtured as part of a curriculum. As you move from pre-primary to primary, we are talking about outcomes and competencies getting complex. Probably that's the way to look at play and sports. And they have a huge role to play here if you were to focus on strengthening learning outcomes in children. I have seen examples in Haryana. I was sharing with you the other day in New, where some of the foundations, I particularly remember the work of SRF Foundation. They were looking at teaching foundational learning through sports, through various games, and it worked very well. They also did an evaluation and saw that worked better than the traditional classroom methodologies that are normally propagated to enhance learning outcomes. So, oh yes, absolutely.
Okay, I think you mentioned also the notion of play and sport interchangeably based on how you're using them in the context of education. In fact, the policy, National Education Policy 2020 that came out speaks a lot about interdisciplinary learning or focus on experiential learning, and how can we integrate play. In fact, play is the operative word or phrase used there instead of sport in some form. So in that context, one is that we have all the good things which I think we all are saying, and the policy also seems to suggest that we ought to do. And second is the program, the delivery of the programs at a school level. We still feel that there is perhaps some gap that kind of comes up in some form from policy to implementation. Are there any inputs, I mean, from your experience, because you've straddled both these areas pretty well over the years, on how do we bridge? And we have in India at least, we have everything that a policy would require in terms of the guiding principles and the prescriptive elements, but how do we get it in action, implemented in the school system? What are the some inputs and learnings and from that will help, Suman?
So I think you're well aware that we do have good policies. Many of the policies have aged over the years, and we have come up with new policies, and everything is written well, thought of well. You have got teams to work, apply their minds, and the best resource has been put as a policy document. The challenge is to make it work and translate that into action. And that's the big challenge for many of the policies that are available across many countries, I would say. So even to make this particular focus on sports, what policy is talking about it, about play, sports, to translate it into reality, into action, I think you need a very clear-cut planning and instill accountability across different levels of the system. That's where things can really happen to change. Giving you a concrete example, because this is very well easily said by many people, oh, this needs to be translated and you need to have action. So we did have a whole piece around working on girls' education and life skills education. Again, a priority which is towards the backside. You're talking about education, let's talk about learning competencies. Okay, girls are part of it, so why talk about gender? All right, life skills can already be given like this, so why talk about it? So plus things make it completely get ignored. So at that point of time, there was a buying in from the government, from the highest level of leadership. We had Education Secretary over there, Mr. Anil Sarup, dynamic person, yes, and really interested on making a difference. He still is trying to make a difference through his platform, Nexus of Good. And that's when he said, okay, you are talking about something. I'm convinced we all should do something for girls. I'm convinced we all should have life skills. But you tell me as a government, what is expected of me, what I should do, what kind of orders you expect, from which level, and what is the action expected? And then how do you put accountability? So just give me a very simple tabulation of that, put your heads together, and I shall make it work. So that's important for anything to happen. If you want policy to be really translated, you have to pick those right pieces, make a very clear-cut structure, and set up accountability measures. You can start from a small place or the entire state or a district block, up to you. So I think that's the way to go forward, and make sure, keep measuring, keep supporting, do quality assurance activities, provide support to make that things are happening and results are more tangible.
Certainly, I think so. So that in terms of the accountability, I think that's one of the key elements over here in terms of keeping the system accountable to implement some of this. Now, if I look at the on-ground programming, Suman, we have seen, it may be true for other areas as well, but especially in sports, there has been work which has been, I won't say fragmented, but we have islands of excellences in some form. We don't have a sustained, large, scaled program in some form, though there has been attempt from the government in the past, at least at input level, to ensure there is some level of quality of experience that comes in at a school level in sport. And there again, when you said accountability, there could be players like the state and the civil society or the community itself in some form, running some pieces over there. So how do you scale and sustain? Are there any success stories, let's say, other tools which you may have seen, either non-sports, digital platforms or whatever else, which you have seen scaling? Could we use any of the best practices to scale sports programs or sport for development programs as well?
So it's kind of a difficult and an easy question. I will not probably be able to point out one example per se, but I can tell you, we did have a PICA program years ago, in which there was a government buying into scaling up this whole initiative around sports. I think it was 2008 when it started. It was supported by Comic Relief, British High Commission, etc. But then the entire country got into the wave and said, well, okay, we need to do something different, get community involved. And that's the piece that I would like to pick up from where you started last time. It's all about demand and supply. When the community starts demanding, it's important for the government and donors and civil society actors to look at supply elements. How do you make community aware about the importance and advantages of sports is important. That helps in sustaining and creating sustainable interventions. So if you are involving community, that's good. If you are looking at building capacities at the local level, even when you pull out as a donor and if you exit, how do you make sure that things get sustained is important. So those two pieces are basically the fulcrum around which the whole sustainability rests for any program, be it, and definitely for sports. So I remember in PICA, you did have volunteers who were identified from the community level, and you had block, district, other structures. Again, those need not be very heavy structures. You can just look at the existing education structure and see how can we just dovetail things and surge forward. So that works if there is a very important awareness, orientation, and involvement of community, strengthen the whole demand side, and then look how supply can balance it out. We'll really work on that.
Right.
And sustainability has to be thought of right from the beginning, not later. Normally, you look at both assessments and sustainabilities after inputs have started. So the strategy formulation has to begin with how you're talking about this initiative. Okay, you're starting spending whatever dollars and rupees that you want to pump in. But let's think about once these dollars are not there, this money is not there, how this initiative will be sustainable. If it is not, it's not worth it. So your perception, your vision around how this sustainability will work has to be thought of before and not after.
Got it. No, I think these are great points. And in fact, you mentioned demand and supply as part of the pull that we need to see. And I think your earlier remark on lack of evidence-based programming as part of our, especially in sports as well. So, the other question I was wrestling with was, the idea of evidence collection or idea of impact assessment or impact analysis of these programs. Now, typically these are done to appease a donor. A donor may want some reports in some form. How do you view, because it's very important that this evidence is available to the community for the demand or the advocacy to work at some level. Now, do you, in your experience, how do you instrument this impact analysis? Should it be done by the implementation or service provider? Should it be a third-party work? Should it be handled by the donor? How do you see this going, and what could be the gaps here which might come in the way of propagating the whole idea of sport for the change we are talking about?
So I think it all depends on the purpose by which you want to evaluate. You want to evaluate a program, or you really want to see whether it is working or not. To my mind, a continuous evaluation or assessment of the skills or the milestones that you want to achieve is important, so that you can at the right time keep taking amends. So you amend the strategy. If that's not working, you change it. All that can only happen basis the assessments that you're doing. And the assessment has to be done by people who are involved. So to my mind, it's the teachers who are best to assess whether this is working or not working. Is sports really helping? And has there been a change in the whole environment? Has it been able to give safe spaces, etc.? Not. If not, then how can I change it? And then if you're talking about a donor perspective, you're talking about the evidence in terms of looking at resource mobilizations, then you do need to have a concrete evaluation undertaken. And then again, you have to decide whether it is a third party, if you need an unbiased, or you want to do it yourself to change your strategy and then advocate further for resource generation.
Right. No, great. I think these are, brilliant inputs in terms of at least our understanding of at least how do we scale sustained sport, especially in times like these. We just end of the at least some of the questions I had in mind. Just one last piece. Any counterintuitive or dopey predictions 2 years or 3 years from now? What we might be discussing in a similar panel. Do you think it is going to be something similar, or you see any change, large format change happening anytime soon, so that we change the topic to something else?
I'm not a Nostradamus, but I can just think that we're just coming out of this pandemic, and it's not the end of it. I feel there are going to be many, many pandemic, and I have been saying that for years now. The next pandemic is going to be around mental health, and it's coming true thanks to the pandemic, because of the pandemic. So I feel that 3 years from now, maybe sports can be recognized as an important tool to address mental health. That would be very, very important for everybody. We're talking about adults, but we are beginning early. So this will be a tool which will be accepted by parents to be integrated in education. They will not say, okay, only learning, but yes, sports. So a relevant, genuine status to sports should be given. And I hope we are sitting here and be able to talk about how it has contributed to enhancing, supporting psychosocial support to children.
Well, absolutely. I think even the current timing for the emotional health, I think there is a lot of work required there, given all of us coming out of. So I hope some of that is taken up by the various actors that we spoke of. But I think I'm at the end of my questions. Will not. So just wanted to summarize. I think my key takeaways from this session. I think one, of course, is the idea of foundational learning and how sport is intrinsic to that. I think some of that came out very clearly. So I think which is a very important input to a lot of us who are trying to create programs to get children back into schools. Second is accountability of various actors when you are implementing this policy to execution on ground, which I think is, I've made a note of that. The demand supply piece, which requires advocacy, requires working at a community level through evidence-led programming in terms of the impact that we might be making through sport and other interventions. And lastly, the idea of play as a therapy. I think I'm making a note of that, and how an idea whose time perhaps might have come at this time. Any last input from you, Dr. Suman? Otherwise, we're at the end of the session here.
No, thank you, and all the best in your endeavor. I think you are really doing a great job in pushing this through education, and all the best to you and the team to take it forward. Thank you very much for having me around here.
Super. So thanks everyone, and I think thanks Dr. Suman again for a brilliant session. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did, and we wish you all the very best for your existing assignment at Sierra Leone, and more powers to the work that you're doing at UNICEF. And we hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.